Next, we're going to hear from a fellow who is probably one of your favorite South Dakotans, and if he's not, it's only because you haven't met him yet. So within an hour, he will be one of your very favorite South Dakotans. He celebrated his 90th birthday with that on January 50th. Is that right? Vern and Ashley. I got to know him in the 1990s. Vern's been active in so many things, but I got to know him. He was very active in conservation and water quality issues in the 1990s. But many people know him for many different reasons. He grew up on the Crow Creek Reservation in the 1920s and 30s, hunted, fished, trapped, rode horses, helped with farming. He harvested wild turnips and fruit and mouse beans. Mouse beans, he said, are grains that the mice would stash away. If you knew where to find them, you could find mouse beans. His life revolved around the river. He can write and speak Dakota to this day. He's a contemporary of Oscar Howe. He grew up with Oscar Howe on the Crow Creek Reservation. Longtime friend of the late great artist. Vern went on to serve in the Army Air Corps in World War II. He came home and as a very young man was elected to the Crow Creek Tribal Council. As a young adult, he soon decided that the old ways were gone and new ways were needed, and he knew that education was going to be a key part of that. So at age 34, he went off to college in 1951 at Dakota Wesleyan University. George McGovern was one of his teachers. And I can assure you that he learned some things from George McGovern, and I'll bet George McGovern learned some things from Vern Ashley. With the college degree and his life experiences, he's put all of that to great use for South Dakota. He served with the BIA on the Standing Rock Reservation for 10 years. In 1965, he's been involved in so many things that we can't begin to list them. He continues to go to Washington and lobby and educate people on tribal issues. With him today are some granddaughters and great-granddaughters. He has 6 living children and about a half dozen or more grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A wonderful extended family. He's been very busy in retirement. He lives out at the Grey Goose Road, where he continues to fish and stay active in many things. Today he's going to talk about the Great Depression and how it affected life on the Crow Creek Reservation. A good friend of every South Dakotan, Vern Ashley. Give him a good welcome.
I want to thank you, Mr. Hanhoff. You know, I've got so much to tell you, and I've only got so much time to do it. But first I'd like to tell you that I am a living descendant of prisoners of war who were brought from Minnesota to the Crow Creek Reservation in 1863. You know, the Sioux Uprising in Minnesota is 1862. And I've been invited to the Lincoln Day dinner, and I tell my friends, no, I can't do that. What's the matter? President Lincoln gave the order to hang 32 of my ancestors at Mankato, Minnesota. And I'm sorry, that's okay. But my ancestors were brought down on barges from Fort Snelling down the Mississippi River to St. Louis, then up the Missouri to the Crow Creek Reservation. Those of you who are familiar with the road going from 34 towards Chamberlain, there's a pointed bank as you go down in Wolf Creek. I was born about a couple hundred yards north of there. And I think I came from pretty good stock to be surviving because I'm the only living member of my family. And in 84 years ago, I started my education at Chamberlain, South Dakota. Because my father was a progressive thinking man, and he got a contract for the mail route from Chamberlain to Fort Thompson. So we moved to Chamberlain, and that's where I started to get my education. At that time, there was no kindergarten or these fancy names you got today for all the young kids. We had to get right in there and start learning our 3 R's. But that, of course, didn't last all very long. We moved back to the reservation. And then in 24, they brought me up here to Prairie Indian School. And my oldest sister, she was about 15 years older than I am. And she was working in there, and a lot of the students had Oh, I said, we know your mother. He said, at least she was working. I said, no. I said, she was my sister. And, I grew up speaking the Dakota language. That's Dakota, not Lakota. So I am fluent in reading, writing, and yeah, I like to sing hymns. I like to say prayers in Dakota because, and I'm an Episcopalian, and I'll show you how I got the name. You know, back in the late 1800s, when the government was sending young men and women back east to school, these were not children. My dad was probably 18 or 19, and they were sending back to Carlisle and Hampton, Virginia. But my father and my uncle, my father's name was Wallace, and my uncle's name was Ed. And before they went back to school east, the Indian agency said, you'll have to change your name because you're going among white people, and you've got to shorten your name. My father's name was Tashonka Hintro, which means his great horses. So they threw names around, and of course none of them sounded good, so who should walk in the door but Dr. Edward Ashley, one of the first Episcopal missionaries to South Dakota. And when the Indian agent told him their problem, he said, I'll solve that, I'll give you my name. So if you know my family, all our names have some English connotation. My oldest brother's name was Richard, and Lacey, Victoria, and Aaron, and Vernon, and Lauren, you know, they all have you don't hear these names very often anymore. But that's where we get our name, Ashley. So recently I wrote a letter on Boy Scouting. I was a Boy Scout leader in North Dakota for quite a few years, and I got to be an Explorer Scout leader. So I wrote a letter to my son in Albuquerque, who is involved in scouting, and in there, and I wrote to him about these things that I'm telling you. And so what he's doing is presenting it to the Boy Scout Council, and so that'll be. Now, getting away from that, we come, you know, at that time everybody was poor. I don't know if any of you, even if you're older ones, know what real drought is. You know, you say today you talk about drought. Why, if you're not getting a little rain, you say it's drought. That's not drought. In the dirty 30s, when we had drought, that was when there was no rain, hot summer, hot temperatures over 100 and some degrees, and we was plagued by grasshoppers and Mormon crickets. You know, so the president had to do something. And I want you to listen. Well, I want to make a comparison before I complete. At that time, you know, the president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. And it was nobody, you know, as I say, we knew we had to do something because of the drought, and even our neighbors, they were poor. So when the FDR developed the alphabetical programs, like the WPA and ECW and CCC, ID, you know, those things did a wonderful job for the country, especially for our Indian reservations and the whites as well. It taught you the work ethic. It taught our people work ethic. You had to get up and get there at 8 o'clock and work 8 hours a day, and so on. And and then in the process, we built things like the WPA. We made if you go to Chamberlain, you'd see the Crow Creek Dam, which is not a dam anymore, but just beyond that, going east, there's a landfill. We made that by just team and wagon. Now, if you got my letter that I wrote, I describe a lot of this. And everybody who had a team of wagon, or a team of horses and a wagon, they used 2x6s to make a makeshift dump wagon. And then what I did, I just got out of high school out of Flandreau in 1935. And so then I had to work with my father, who was aging, so I went and I walked. Sometimes I rode with my neighbor who he used his wagon and horses. And you know, today you see trailers pulling all these here backhoes or whatever you call them. Those days all we used was a shovel. And so we loaded those wagons by shovel. It took a lot of men to do that, to load a wagon, but it gave them an income, you know, every month, which wasn't much. Probably be $40 a month. But at that time, that is a dollar would buy more than it would today. But anyway, that was the first project I worked on, was that one. And then we went into the emergency conservation work. And that was, we was picking rock. And there again, I walked, I think it was 2 miles to catch the truck. And then, you know, and then had a lunch bucket of some kind. And, you know, it was tough for my folks to prepare lunch too, because it's not like it is today. You can't go in and buy it. Stores were far in between. And so, but they would, and then we had to raise chickens, so we'd use chicken sandwiches. And then I'd go out, we'd pick rock, and then they had trucks, government trucks to haul them. And that is preceding the construction of dams. But all that did is that it taught the Indians the work ethic. You had to get up, you had to get there, and regardless, you had to get there and get in time for work. And then we went to building dams, stock dams. And I don't know if anybody can remember what I'm saying, but we built the dam. It's still in use. If you go east of Fort Thompson, maybe 6-7 miles, there's the Knipling Dam. And that Knipling Dam was built by a team of wagon. And here again, I used my father's horses. And the government had dump wagons. And but I always tell my kids, I must have been tough, because I camped out there in a wall tent and no inner spring mattress. I just had some blankets folded thicker so I could lay down and rest. Then the thing that kept me going, you know, there was no refrigeration, so what we had to do is some canned goods that would that you could eat, you know. And so what did you eat? I said, well, mainly sardines. So today I'm eating sardines again, but they're coming from unpolluted areas. But I had to take care of my horses, and I got to tell you, the experience I gained with this was, I had the inner center team was well broke, and Ben and Snip was 2 grays, and then we got them in the middle, and the outside was a little green broke. So so when the dump wagon had brake, you had a brake lever that you could, and but that's when the government brought in Caterpillars, dirt loaders in those elevators that would just, so we'd come drive with the table wagon underneath the elevator, and when the first dirt hit the box, my horses took off, you know. All I could do is hold on to them and go out and swing around and bring them back in and bring them back underneath the elevator until the horses finally, you got used to it, and that's how we built that. That dam is still there, and I'd like to go back and visit it sometime. But there again, that provided training for a lot of our young men. They had to have training to run those caterpillars, bulldozers, and whatever, big machinery. And that type of training was a benefit to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The Bureau of Indian Affairs Road Department, a lot of their men who went through this training made up the road department, because they could run a blade or caterpillar or whatever. They learned that through the civilian, the CCCID, they call it Indian Division. And But I don't know how long I worked, because I'm only talking about a year and a half, I think. Because, see, I graduated in '35 in spring, and then I went into that WP project. And then the rock crew, and that preceded the dam building because the rock was used for riprap. And then from there, I went into, I had carpentry training at Flanders Indian School, so I went into carpentry where we built things for the dams. Now there's a place right north of Fort Thompson, we call it the Hanson Place, and that's where you see the buffalo. There's a dam right in there. In that dam, I and Sergeant Grey Cloud and a carpenter from Reliance, by the name of Pete Meng, name's M-E-N-G, and he was the head carpenter, so the three of us would make all of the forms and build the forms and pour concrete. And but here again, you know, you had to carry something for your lunch, so we'd use a syrup pail, knock holes in the bottom and the top so it'll get a little air, and that's what we carried in. Here again, our lunch was probably chicken, you know, whatever you could get. And but that, I think the dam is still there in use. But it's, I don't know what, that construction went on. And from there we went in, that was the 36. Well, then the Indian agency said, you can't get a job here unless you join the Civilian Conservation Corps. That's the CCC camp. So, what else could I do? I said, okay, I'll join the CCCs then. So we joined, and I should have brought my annual. I got my annual, it was published in 1937. And so I was stationed right here at Farm Island. And I helped build the, here again, I have my carpentry training, I helped build the Isaac Walton League building. And you know, I was trying to get some information on Isaac Walton League building, the historic aspect of it. And I couldn't find anybody in town who had anything. But I did have some pictures that I duplicated. And I often wondered how many of the boys are living who were in the Civilian Conservation Corps. And I remember one of the guys that worked on the Isaac Walton was Herbie Haynes. I don't know, can't remember where he's from. But most of the boys are from around the central South Dakota. And but Herbie I remember, and then the guy that was ahead of that was Tom Prendergast. He was the kind of the head boss that administered the construction. And but you know, all of these things did a lot of good. That did a lot of good for South Dakota and the country in general. But the thing I wanted to point out is that, you know, and during that time, it was difficult, as I say, for everybody, because everybody was poor, or equally poor. And well, when this all ended, and I got my discharge papers in my annual, but when you think about it, we went into World War II. World War II, and you know darn well we wasn't ready for war because of the drought and the economic conditions and everything else. But I want to commend them. The American citizens are the greatest people on earth. They never demonstrated to impeach FDR. In fact, everybody really honored this man. And the thing that got me was, of course, they had the draft. So they took all three of us, my older brother, myself, and my younger brother. Aaron and Vernon and Lauren, the three of us. And all we had left, of course, my father died in the process, so I had my widowed mother. And I often wondered how she felt when they took all three of us at one time. And the guy from the county seats from Gan Valley come in the car and come in the evening and come and got us. So then we went to Washington Springs. We boarded the train and didn't know where we were going. And I think where we ended up was Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And there, all three of us were separated. But of course, we was all Army. My older brother went into regular infantry, and Lauren went into aircraft, and I went into the Air Corps. So I'm an Army Air Corps man. When I was discharged, there still was no Air Force, it was after. And but the thing that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because of the discipline. The discipline, even today, I never leave my bed unless that bed is made. You gotta drop a coin so it bounce. But that's just a carryover, and it just stuck in my mind. That's what I gotta do. I gotta get up in the morning, make my bed, and so forth. I played football and baseball for the Army, and basketball too. And I remember playing for these different military installations. We played one of the toughest games I remember. We played the Marine Corps out of California, and I often wondered if my brother-in-law was in that group. That was the toughest game I ever played. I got my face skinned, but it made me mad, so I didn't want to come out. I just went in there and played the full game. Baseball was but the thing that I remember is when I was growing up, I did a lot of running because it was open grazing. So my job was to go get the horses and bring them in. So what I do is run the ridges, run them and find them. And the hardest thing to catch is a saddle horse. Because darn well you're going to be a road. So if I don't catch a saddle horse, I got to run back and bring them back in. So most of my life, I did a lot of running. So when I got into the service, a lot of my buddies are all from the East, but they're all gone now. But they always said, "Chief, I don't know what you could do if you had training." I said, "I don't know." But it was, as I say, it was the best experience in my life to go into the military. And all of these things I'm telling you is good for our Indian people and good for America, really. And as I say, I've got a granddaughter here from the Marines. And I understand she'll be presenting colors at the Iwo Jima Memorial. So I'm proud of it. And then my family, we represent the Army, Air Corps, Navy, and the Marines. And I think that some of you folks really know my son, Bob. He was a captain in the Marine Corps. And as a result of the first Desert Storm, he lost his life. Of course, that's almost 10 years ago. But he wanted to do that because his uncle was Lieutenant Colonel Pat Flynn. He was a Marine pilot. So that's what compelled him to go and get into the Marines. So my oldest son, who is one of the top bureau officials at Phoenix, Arizona, he's a Vietnam veteran. And I think it's what caused his first divorce was, what do you call it, the post-traumatic disorder or something. So he had to go through a psychiatrist and try to straighten out his life. But in the process, of course, she divorced. And I have got one granddaughter for that marriage, and I'm proud to say she is successful. My grandchildren are just as sharp as can be, you know. So it's an interesting world we live in, and I'm glad to be here with you. To be around for 90 years is something. I've got a lot more to tell you, and it's not enough time to really cover everything. But you know, as I say, if you got a copy of the South Dakota magazine, that tells you a lot more about my life, my family, and you know, there was something in the paper Sunday in the Rapid City Journal. There's an Indian girl who's going to get a doctor's degree at the Arizona State University. And the first name is Otakoye, and I can't remember her last name, Poirier or something like that. But just think as the first Indian to attain that environmental engineering. And I called the Dakota Times and I said, I want you guys to give this prior coverage, because that's something for our Indian people to be proud of, to have a young girl that will attain these things. And I'm proud of my granddaughter for being in the Marine position she's in. And you know, you know, the point I wanted to make in closing was that I want to make a comparison. This president faced some of the most difficult things in our history. Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita hit the south of the New Orleans area and just devastated that part of the country. Beside that, the 9/11 thing in World Trade Center and in the Pentagon. Beside that, going into war. You know, what man can take all of this? But now they understand they're going to drive on to impeach him. For what? You know? I think that's why I'm comparing President Bush to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR, nobody talked about impeachment. And just think that everything was rationed. The gas, sugar. And I got to tell you a story about the rationing. I'm going to say some things in Indian, but I'll translate it. You know, when there was rationing, and I don't know if any of you know this time, but you had to go in and get registered and everything else. And so on a reservation, the people all come in there, and so the man's name was Wounded Knee. And so when they got in there, they had a translator, of course, to translate. He said, we want him to tell your real name. They charged it. He said, hey, Oyakayo. Yes. So, he said, my name is Wounded D. So, the agent, he couldn't understand how. When the wife came, he said, we want you to tell your real name. The judge said, hey, champion, they want your real name. She said, yes. My name is Chompy. So the guy didn't know how to translate that. He looked at that. He said, her real name is Sugar. So the agent said, oh, no, wait a minute. He said, we don't care what she does with the stamps. If she wants to buy sugar, well, that's all right. But we want her real name. That created quite a stake, you know, for a while. But that was the truth. You know, that's the way it was. And I don't know, but do you have any? I make this comparison because our president's in a difficult situation. And even now, you know, you got that border situation. And I see that he met with Fox in Cancun and the Canadian leader. And but these are really tough issues. Well, just think about it. Here in this state, our governor and the legislature adopted that abortion bill. My gosh, I'm telling you that I didn't realize so many people were for abortion, you know. That's the way I take it anyway. But these are difficult questions today. And but the thing is, that gets me is, then don't they have a governor in those states, Louisiana and Mississippi? Or don't they have mayors? Don't they have county commissioners? Don't they have all of these things in place? We do here in South Dakota. You know, we've got all these in place. But what does the news media do? They attack the president, you know. And that's, to me, is ridiculous. With that, I want to tell you that the programs that I was scheduled to speak on, the alphabetical program, did a world of good. And it might be good to put some of those in place today, you know. But you know that coming into the CCCs, I only got $45 a month, but most of that was sent to my parents. And I had $5 to spend. And, but I was provided clothing and everything, food, everything else. And so what I do is I cut hair, turn some extra. And I got to be a pretty good barber, so I'd cut hair, and all I charged was 25 cents, you know. But it gave me a little extra spending money. And all of these things were good for us. And I just want to close by telling you I'm pleased to be here, and I hope I left you a message. And you know, when I was talking to my grandchildren, when I was, see, there was no high school on the reservation, so they sent me to Flandreau, which is near the Minnesota border. And then in my senior year, I had to write an essay, you know. Where will you be 20 years from now? What was I going to be? Where will I be? I could even think of where I was going to be, you know. But if anybody told me that you'd be working for the governors of South Dakota, you'll say, what? That's a pipe dream, you know. But I did. I worked for 3 governors in South Dakota. Governor Nils Boe, Frank Farrar, and Dick Knight. Reverend Nils Boe, to me, was an ideal governor. He had the stature. You know, when he entered the room, you know, well, that was the governor, you know. And I always think he was great. I've got stuff that he's given me. And Frank Farrar, which was the youngest governor at that time in the nation, he's the only one living. So when I had my birthday party here at the Visitor Center, Governor Farrar couldn't be there, but he gave me a letter. He gave me a nice letter and complimented me for the work I did for the state of South Dakota. And you know, in my working in the state, when I left the governor's office, I headed a federal agency called the Federal Agency for Volunteer Service. And I administered all senior programs for North and South Dakota. I worked with Grand Forks, Fargo, Bismarck, Mandan, Dickinson, and all the bigger towns in South Dakota had projects. And you know, the thing was, we had a Columbus Day dinner at Dickinson, Devil's Lake. So when I was introduced, and of course, as a full-blood Indian, you know, when I was in there, and so I said, you know, the only thing that I am concerned about of course it was in the Columbus building, I guess they called it, is that my tribe had bad immigration laws. I said, if they had a good immigration law, you people wouldn't be here. So, but anyway, just I'd like to end by telling you a story. Webster Tuwalk says, you're a good Indian, you're a good storyteller. But this story, I shouldn't tell it because I'll grow hair when I don't want it, you know. But this is the story about how the wood duck got red eyes. And you know, in Indian legends, we use animals for characters. And the Onktomi is a character that we use pretty widely. Onktomi means a spider, but that doesn't mean the little spider that you mean. And you meet these Onktomis every day among all of us. And I always think of politicians. When the politician comes around, well, hello, my friend. You know, once in a year he comes, so you turn the spider over, I said. You know. Now getting back to my story. Onktomi he was hibernating in the wintertime. And towards spring he got pretty hungry. So he came out, and still probably a little earlier than this. He got out and stretched, and he said, I'm hungry, I want to see if I can find something to eat. So he started walking down along the creek. And pretty soon he heard something, so he stopped. And what he heard was some ducks. Now, if I could just get one of those ducks to eat, he said, I'll be all right. So as he walked closer, he wanted to trace where those ducks were at. And when he got near, he could see them. So what he did was he pulled up pejishasha. That's a red grass, tall red grass, native grass. He pulled some of those up and tied them in the bottle and put them over his shoulder. And then he started walking towards those ducks. Then when he got near them, he angled off up the hill. And the ducks saw him, they said, Onktomi! And he made off, he didn't hear them. So, Onktomi! They said, they didn't hear him. The third time he stopped. Oh! And he stopped, he said, where are you going? Well, what do you got on your back? And that's what I got here. Well, these are old songs that I've got on my back, he said. And where are you going? He said, I'm invited to a dance over the hill here, and I'm going to go sing for them, you know. And so, come on, come and sing for us, the ducks. And that's just what he wanted. So he said, well, before I do that, you're going to make a willows hut, like a sweat lodge type thing. And he designed this with just one entryway. And so when he get it, he arranged the ducks around there. Some of them are big mallards and other types of ducks, some teal and stuff like that. But, so he was going to sing. And he said, when he sings, he said, dance with your eyes closed. First one who opens his eyes is going to have red eyes. So he started singing. Stokamos wachipo, stokamos wachipo, stakavadaki, stani shakti. Dance with your eyes closed, dance with your eyes closed. The first one who opens his eyes is going to have red eyes. So while he was singing, they were dancing. The ducks were going around. And when at the time he got here, he had picked up a little club. So the big fat ones, he come up there and he hit him right in the back of the head. And then pretty soon one kind of running. The wood duck opened his eyes and said, open your eyes before he kills us all. So they beat him up and all beat it out of there. But the key to the story is that he was going to, well, I'm going to eat. So he went down to a tree and he built a fire and he said he was going to cook these geese or ducks. And so then he took a shower. While he was swimming in the water, he looked up and there was a raccoon up in a tree trimming the ducks. So he didn't get anything to eat in the end. Well, I think that will finish my remarks, and if there's any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer.
Any questions?
I noticed you mentioned the rationing, and I think that's about probably only the first or second time I heard that at this conference. And I remember my parents talking about different things that were rationed. Think coffee and sugar and whatever. What are some of the other things that you remember having only a little of or none of until the end of the month?
What things were rationed on the reservation? What goods?
What the rationing? Well, the same thing that rationed all over the country.
What were you short of? What things were you short of on the reservation?
Well, I don't know what we were short of, but
Food?
what?
Certain food items?
Well, I don't know if there's any shortage, but what we were lacking was, you know, sugar and other stuff. So it,
Any different than the rest of South Dakota?
no, I don't think it's any different across the state because everybody was in the same boat, you know. Everybody was poor, that's what I'm trying to point out. And, you know, a lot of my neighbors were Caucasian. The Herman Cook family was right near me, and then the Swansons and the Matikas. But they came to, never thinking, you know, they come to our place. I rode a lot of times when I was carrying a shovel with Herman Cook. He had a wagon with the dump boards in it and so forth. And so I'd ride with him. And yeah, it was quite a time.
The questions? Did you do a lot of hunting and fishing and gardening? In some ways, maybe some of the Native American people were better off because they were still hunting and fishing?
Well, you know, when that drought was there was nothing to hunt really.
The wildlife disappeared.
They were gone. They were looking for greener pastures too, you know.
They went to Washington.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay.